Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the worst card designs for 1991 for both basketball and for baseball cards. And the reason I'm doing just these two sports is because, while yes, in the 1980s we had over 40 different cards spread out over the entire decade, and I looked at all of those in one pair of videos. Here in 1991, there was such a variety of different kinds of card designs that I felt I didn't feel right lumping them all together and leaving out the whole middle portion of all these crazy ideas that were coming up, that everybody was coming up with at this time. I wanted to take the time to really sit down and look at them and see a much better collection of different designs from each of the years moving forward from 1991 moving forward. And even though some of these designs are repeated across different sports, there were over 10 different card companies making cards, well over 10. And so that means that there's so much variety. I really wanted to give them all a fair shot. So I decided to split them up, so I would be looking at baseball and basketball in one group. I'll be looking at football and hockey in another group, and then I'm going to do a combination of the two so that you can really see what was going on with each of all the different cards in these sports. So not every single card is going to show up in these videos, but at least you'll get a really good cross section of them. And since I'm starting here with baseball and with basketball, I'm actually going to do two honorable mentions. The honorable mentions that I'm doing here, I'm going to start off with the Don Russ baseball, or the only Don Russ. And the reason I'm putting this on here is, I hate to admit it, but this is actually a good card design. Not great, but it's a good card design. It's a fun card design. It's very bright, it's very flashy. It is designed for kids. It is absolutely designed for kids. And it is successful in that way. It also tends to have some pretty good images. The way that the card border works with the images is a good pairing. So I really do regret that I like this card for one simple reason. I started collecting in 1990. And by 1991, we were already starting to see the sheer magnitude of the junk wax era. By 92, 93, you were finding so many people who had just abandoned the sport, and they had all these cards that were useless. They were absolutely no value, and they were trying to get rid of them. You would get shopping bags full of cards just dumped right in there. And you're looking at it initially going, man, the borders in this, oh, this has got to be terrible. Then you start going through and you find there's nothing of value in there. But what the cards you're pulling out are 1988 cards, baseball, 1989 cards, 1990 cards. And you would also get a lot of 1991 Don Russ and 1991 Flir Baseball. Those were just littered in these bags. So for me, I always looked at the 1991 design, and I never really differentiated it as still at that point fairly new. To me, it looked more like an innovative 1989 card. It was just jumbled up. The difference between 89 Don Russ, 90 Don Russ, and 91 Don Russ, I didn't know, I didn't care. They were all kind of the same thing. So it's tough for me to look at this card and see it as a 1991 card, because to me it's an older card, and I lump it in with that. And when you look at the card back, it's the same card back they'd been doing for over a decade. So I want it to be terrible, but if I take the time to look at it, I realize it's actually pretty decent. So I can't leave it off this list, but I can't put it on the list because it's actually a pretty good card. My heart says put it on the list. My brain says, nah, it doesn't belong here. And kind of similarly, I'm also going with an honorable mention of the Flir Basketball. In this case, this is a card design that's really not a great card design. It's better than the 1990 Flir card design, but that's not hard. Just about everything is better than the 1990 card designs for Flir. And Flir, while they were trying to kind of pull themselves back out of the hole, this card was not a good card design, but it actually worked. It's an interesting combination. So the thing about this card is it's got some really strong colors, very subdued, which is nice, but it's got big bands on either side with that NBA logo spread throughout. It's overdone, but they tended to do a really good job of matching that up with the images in the card. And by having a subdued border, a very large subdued border, which really focused you in on the player stands out really well. And so in this case, this is a mediocre card design that works, really works. And I don't want to put it on this list because I like it. I like how it comes across. but I have to acknowledge it's not a great card design, it's just very successful. But that kind of leads me into my number 5 on the list, which is 1991 NBA Hoops. And this is, to me, the most emotionally challenging of all the cards, because this was the last card that I put onto this list. And the reason is, while I started in 1990, the first card set I completed was 1991 NBA Hoops Series 1, whole set. And on top of that, I lived in kind of an attic space, and I had this big, very close angled ceiling. And so I took the little card sleeves and I glued the card sleeves and stuck all these cards in, so I had the whole set up on the ceiling. And I love this card set because it's the first card set I ever completed. But at the same time, I have to admit, I've always known that it's not that great of a card design. It's a boring card design. I really should have this further down on the list, but I have a personal appreciation for it. And I do admit the card back is really good. So I'm just going to say that it's totally at number 5 because of the card back and not because of my own personal opinion. But it was the last addition onto the worst of list, because I do have to acknowledge that I have a lot of personal memories of this. And as far as personal memories go, I have to also acknowledge that for number 4, 1991 Stadium Club, I remember how innovative this card was and how amazing the card was. For Topps, when they really cared to, they could be incredibly innovative, but they also had a tendency to not totally get the whole design concept. And this is a great example of it. The card itself is not a high gloss card, it's a semi-gloss, which means that it has the ability to really show off the detailing on the card if you print the detailing in, which they did. So the card reads well, and then it's got a very subdued quality to it with a full bleed card design. So that means that the image reads perfectly. On top of that, the element that they have for the name and the logo is pulled up into the card a bit so that the image falls below and it just kind of floats there and it becomes less of an obstruction. But they also had gold foil in it, which really helped that whole element. And it meant that the card never got in the way of the image. In fact, one of the most innovative moments in card collecting was the gold foil here on this card. Very, very impressive that they were doing this. The problem that the card has, though, is that the images, while really great if you take the time to look at them, there's nothing that grabs you about them. This card was designed to give you these wonderful shots of the scenery, all the detailing, the rich detailing of everything that's going on, and to really soak in each image. And in that way, it's very successful. But unfortunately, it becomes kind of boring. Nothing about the card jumps out and grabs you. And when you put them into binder pages, they just totally disappear. The cards were absolutely treasured in 1991 because we were looking at each card. But over the years, as more and more stuff came in, the cards disappear. There's nothing distinguishing about these cards. A common problem with Stadium Club. But another problem with Stadium Club is the card backs are really pretty lousy. I do note, I absolutely love the rookie cards on the back. It was Topps flexing its muscles to remind everybody that, hey, it's this card with all these great rookie cards from all the years. And so I love that, and I love the tradition that they did for a couple of years of making sure these were on there. That is a good plus. But overall, the card backs are really lousy. The card front is uninspiring. It was amazing in 1991. It's not amazing anymore. Not at all. Take the time to look at each one. Great. But overall, pretty lacking. But Topps was having a difficult time figuring out how to make a high-end card. And that was something they had a problem with 2 years earlier with Bowman. Speaking of which, for me at number 3, I'm going with the 1991 Bowman. Now, Bowman, this is the best of the Bowman cards, and actually I have to admit, this card has a tendency to come out looking really good. On individual bases, some of these cards, they look great. The problem that the card has is entirely reliant on the picture, which you could say is the same with Stadium Club, but the difference is that here it is an actual border that is designed to enhance an image. And if the image looks good, if it's a good pairing, then it comes through beautifully. If it's not a good pairing, it's a super boring card because it's got the big white border around the outside, almost no detailing, I like the color fade at the bottom, but other than that, there's nothing about this card that stands out. Nothing about this card that reads on its own. It is a frame for a picture, and if the picture doesn't work, the card is just boring, absolutely boring. So the only reason I have this below Stadium Club is when you flip that card over. I mean, I don't like the Stadium Club card, but oh my word, the Bowman cards, it's Baseball Nerd Stats on the back. That's something that they'd been doing from the beginning. And what I don't like about it is, if you're into that, great, that's wonderful. But if you're not into it, it means that the cards are only a front for most collectors. And on top of that, these stats make no sense after 1 year because, okay, so he had all this performance against the California Angels. Who cares? That was 2 years ago. What was the pitching like with the Angels? You don't remember. You don't know. It doesn't have any longevity. So this is a card that only works in the first year. And then after that, the card back is just an ugly mess. So that's a big problem that these cards have. And it was something that they were going to have to solve. So Bowman, to me, it still can't move out of the number 3 spot in terms of baseball and including basketball. But at least Topps wasn't as bad as Flir continued to be. Here with Ultra in 1991, this was their first premium attempt. And they're trying to compete with Upper Deck. And what they did was they looked at Pro Set, which was a great card, but it was a base brand card. They used the same card stock as Pro Set, and they used kind of the same design. They just got rid of the colors and decided we're going to have a really cool silver with a slight gold hue border. Top, bottom, we're going to make them a little bit thinner, and we're going to let the image stand out. And in theory, that's great. The whole idea behind it I like, and they did have a tendency to choose good images. The problem is, in cases like this with Kevin Mitchell, the border basically, you're lucky that the border disappears so you can see the Kevin Mitchell image and you can read that. But that's right there, that's the core problem with this, is the fact that this card works because of the fact that you don't see the border. That's the problem with the card. If the border is the liability, that's an issue. And here, that's exactly the case. The border is a liability. All too often, you have cards where the image itself doesn't have the strength to carry it, and the border is almost annoying. It's not obnoxious, it's just so subdued and blocky, and it doesn't do anything. Pro Set knew to add the colors to do something, so every one of the cards really carried. It was strong, and it enhanced the image. Here, the border's trying to get out of the way, and for a base brand, this would be mediocre. For a high-end brand, it's unforgivable. So I would love to put this in number 1, but look, it's Flir, and if Flir knew how to do anything wrong, it's their base brand. Is this better than 1990? To me, unquestionably yes. But apart from 1990 Flir, there aren't a lot of cards this bad. And I say that with full knowledge that I'm about to say, I really like this card. The card design, the card itself, I like a lot. I think it's a really good card. It's just that the image is in the way. And that's what's weird. This is a card where somebody clearly sat down, designed the card with this big black box saying image will be inserted here. And in that case, it looks great. The yellow tone, beautiful. The lines, the text, everything on this card looks fantastic. It's really strong, really bold, really rich. And then you put the image in, and all of a sudden the image doesn't match. It can't compete with the border, and it kind of dilutes the strong color of the yellow in the card. And these cards are supposed to, you have a whole image in the card. You're supposed to be looking at the image. Now sometimes you can make a cutout of a player and bury him into the overall card design. And in doing that, you can get away with it, and it still looks great because the card is what you're looking at, and he is a part of the card. This is a frame, which means you're supposed to be looking at him. That's the point, the image. And the image hurts the border. I love the border. The image is the liability, which makes absolutely no sense. So here's the thing. These are good checklists. That's about all you can say about 1991 Flir baseball. And that is a sad statement. So this is easy, figuring out the worst card design of 1991 for baseball and basketball. It's the 1991 Flir baseball card. I'd love to say that they got so much better, but they got somewhat better down the road. But this was a card that just, the design work was all wrong. So for me, that's the way that I have this list set up. Now in football, everything's going to look very different because football and hockey has its own spirit. They're very different than these particular sets. But this is how I have these sets laid out. So again, I'm going to look at football and hockey separate, and then I'm going to look at the grand failures between the two in other videos. Then I'll get around to the best and the inserts, etc. later on. Other than that, yeah, that's where I'm going to go with this. So definitely leave comments below about your thoughts of all of this. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Check out my other videos. Thank you guys for watching.